Will,
What's up?
are you ready for our next talk?
What's up? What?
Yeah, are you ready for our next talk?
Oh,
We gotta
yeah. Hold on 1 second. I'm just texting my wife. Oh, someone just liked my post.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on. You want a chicken salad sandwich?
What are you talking about?
I'm getting some food for us, yo. I'm hungry.
Wow, you seem way more enthralled with this than you do with what's going on with this.
Well,
We gotta get going.
I got the whole world in my hand, dude. This is what you call an I world. You know what I'm saying? By the way, Venmo me $10 because food is on the way.
What is going on right now?
Y'all never heard about the I world? I mean, we got the iPhone, the iPad, iMessage, everything. You know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
well, it's obviously your little I world, and we're all just living in it. But don't you remember the topic of our conversation for today?
That's right. We're actually talking about the I world, huh?
That's right, specifically sex in the I world, and we need to get started.
Sorry. Let's go for
Chicken
it.
salad sandwiches.
You saw that?
Yeah,
That's what you call I world power.
Want to hear something crazy, Mr. I World?
Tell me.
Some of the people we're talking to right now could live until the year 2100. Can you imagine how different the world is going to be? Think about it. 80 years ago, there were no cell phones, no internet. TVs were just becoming a thing. Where do you think we'll be 80 years from now?
Well, 80 years from now, I'm gonna be 110, probably living in space.
Okay, well, that's so 2070. The point is, the world will obviously be very different by then, but in many ways, our sin struggles and desire for fulfillment will always be the same. Civil rights leader and activist Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If a person can't stand for something, they'll fall for anything." In other words, if you're not rooted in something or someone, then you'll easily be swayed by our culture.
And as we move into the future, we know views about sex, porn, sexuality, and gender will generally move us further and further away from Christ's teaching.
That's right, and we're going to discuss several sexual activities that are both happening now and may become more rampant in the future. By talking about these things, you may feel embarrassed, but we need you to talk about them because we want you to live with sexual integrity for your entire life. We don't want you to be influenced by the whims of our culture.
So we've asked some experts to share with us insights about the future as well as practical applications for what developing more authentic relationships will look like.
Virtually everything that we choose outside of God and community is going to lead us into greater exile. So in the Old Testament, what I put my trust in is going to be my shame. And so you who put your trust in idols, you who put your trust in pornography, your trust will become your shame. And so anything that you take that begins to offer you a shortcut to not have to deal with the crucibles and the binds of your life is eventually going to be something that fills your body with shame and then will reinforce essentially an addictive relationship with that thing or that behavior.
Wow, if that's how it is today, I can only imagine that we're going to keep hearing the same narrative, that sexual freedom is good and it's healthy to experiment with our sexuality. It's going to become super easy to be slowly swept away by our cultural sexual ethic.
Where does sex addiction come from, and can it come from pornography use, is a really important question because it used to be that sex addiction was primarily something that was rooted in trauma or abuse. The first question that you're asked on a sex addiction assessment is, were you sexually abused? And so a lot of people would think about sex addiction as in some ways like a reenactment of the trauma, of the shame around sexuality. It didn't have to necessarily be sexual abuse, but some form of trauma. What happened though in 2006 and a little bit before that is when internet porn companies got really, really good at figuring out how to get people to stay longer and longer and more engaged with pornography. All of a sudden, people who had no trauma or abuse in their life were now coming into our offices saying that they'd gone way past porn into escorts and all sorts of stuff that traditional sex addicts would go to. And it was really confusing for the clinical community for a while. But what we've begun to understand is that actually early And often exposure to pornography in some ways is itself a trauma. When you have unfiltered access to anything and everything on the web at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, even adults, there's just stuff on there that our brain was never meant to be able to process. It's kind of like trans fat for the mind. People with, pretty good, strong integrity their whole life will come in and say, hey, I've been married 10 years, I've been doing great, and now all of a sudden I went from watching some pornography and now I'm chatting with women online, and I don't know how I got there. And what they find out is, well, it just started with the porn habit that turned into an addiction, which then all addictions want more.
So one of the questions that I'm often asked as a therapist and an author is, hey Jay, what about virtual reality porn? What about something like hentai pornography, which is more in the cartoon animation genre? Isn't that better than going to a brothel, buying sex, those sorts of things? What I would tell you is that in many ways, VR porn, hentai porn, is the marketing department for sex trafficking. Essentially what begins to happen is that this is the nature of basically all levels of unwanted sexual behavior and addiction, is that it begins to start in ways that actually don't feel terribly wrong or egregious. And so you're thinking, I'm just looking at this, no one's getting hurt, this might actually be a cartoon, this is just a virtual world. It's so much better than pursuing a full-blown affair or pursuing, buying sex in some city's red light district. But what essentially pornography and virtual reality porn really begin to groom you with is this understanding that it is okay to use someone else for sexual gain. And this is really what we're dealing with, is what is the nature of what we are called to as followers of Jesus, but also good citizens wherever we live. Well, we need to have an understanding of how is our bent to actually bring love and kindness to others. And so what happens in so many genres of pornography is that you begin to get a sense that it's okay to begin to use this other person for my own gain. But when do you stop that? And so then what you find is that then you start going into a marriage and you begin having very similar connotations with your spouse of, sex and orgasm was basically about my own needs. I don't have to know anyone else. I don't have to do the difficult work of actually coming to understand someone else's body, someone else's heart's intention. I can just get immediate access whenever I want. And then you get into a marriage and you realize that's a disaster. And so essentially, what you have to grapple with all the time with your sexual choices is this moving me to a place of deeper freedom and deeper honor of other people? And what I think you'll find in so many cases is that you actually don't feel free when you're using pornography. So I come at it from a perspective of pornography it is a form of violence against humanity, especially violence against women and violence against children.
It's not just disturbing inventions like VR porn that we need to guard ourselves from. There are several activities that are becoming more and more normalized amongst our culture today. Polyamory is just one example.
Yeah, and you may have never heard of polyamory before, but it means a person who is open to sexual relationships with more than one person with the informed consent of all those involved. In a polyamorous relationship, those involved are meant to be committed to one another.
Believe it or not, recent studies have found at least 5% of Americans are involved in a non-monogamous relationship.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that means there are probably more people who are polyamorous than there are those who identify as LGBT.
And some people say that polyamory is perfectly fine since it's consensual and doesn't hurt anyone.
That may sound good, but we've already seen that consent and lack of harm aren't the only guidelines for Christian sexual ethics.
That's right.
Once again, we have to see if polyamorous relationships fit with the Creator's design for marriage and sex.
So polyamory is a compound word. It's two words put together to form one. So poly means many, And amore means love, so many loves, or plural love. Basically, polyamory has to do with a consensual, oftentimes romantic or sexual relationship with more, or between, or I guess among more than two people, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the question comes up, are polyamorous relationships sinful? Do they go against God's design for sexual and romantic expression? And yes, I'm going to say they are. According to the Bible, God does not validate these kinds of relationships. Again, you can look at Genesis 2, Matthew 19, marriage, the original blueprint for marriage, which Jesus affirms is one man, one woman for life, and all sexual relationships outside that are sin. However, I want to be careful here. I don't want to just say these relationships are sinful, period, done. That's all I'm going to say about it. What about the actual human beings that are caught up in these relationships? What about somebody that maybe has been wooed into a relationship by maybe a girlfriend has been wooed into it with her boyfriend to, he wants to take another girlfriend. And what if out of love for him, she says yes, but deep down she really doesn't want to engage this? And what if she starts to engage in certain things that deep down she just doesn't want to be in, but she feels really stuck and can't get out of this relationship? Like, I want to look through the polyamorous relationship on the surface to the actual people engaged in this and saying, how can I embody the truth and grace of Christ to the people engaging in something that is going against God's design? I never want to just look at the issue. I always want to look through the issue at the actual diversity of the people that are engaging in it.
There's one more area that we have to talk about: sexting. Sexting is any sexually inappropriate text message, image, or video that you send or receive. And you know what? Based on several studies, many teens don't see anything wrong with sexting. Maybe because they think it's normal, or maybe because they see their friends doing it. It's hard to tell just how many people are receiving a sext message, but it is estimated that about 25% of teens have reported receiving a sexually explicit text from their peers, and around 15% have reported sending these images.
Oftentimes, these images don't just end up on one phone. They may end up on many. In fact, many of these images are placed on sites without your knowledge or consent. They are easily shared with others, and once you press send, you no longer have control of that content.
And you know what that means? That means these images could potentially affect your life 5, 10, 15 years along the road. And I'm not even talking about all the legal ramifications.
That's right, Will. In most states, the possession of nude or partially nude photos involving teens is considered child pornography, which is a felony.
Man, can I talk to the guys for a second?
Yeah, please.
If you have been pressuring someone to send you inappropriate messages, or maybe you've been sending inappropriate images of yourself, you're going to regret that one day. I'm telling you right now, you and I and all of us are made in the image of God. And to be made in the image of God means that we honor one another, that we respect one another. And when we send images that are inappropriate or pressure someone else to send it towards us, we violate the Imago Dei, the image of God that God created us to reflect. So my encouragement to you is to really think twice before you engage in these activities.
And girls, the same goes for you. Please do not give in to the pressure or believe the lie that you have to send images of your body to be loved and accepted. This is what the world tells us, but it's not the truth. I want to take a second to talk to you if you have participated in this. I know you might feel shame. I know you might feel guilt. I know you might feel like there's no way you can get out of it and this is now all you're known for. But let me tell you something that's beautiful and true for you today. You have free will and a choice. You can say no. You do not have to engage in these exchanges. You do not have to let your identity be rooted in your physical body, but in the identity that Christ has given you as his daughter. So whether or not you're participating, whether or not you have, whether or not you're thinking about it, as women, we have the choice. You can say no. Remember, you are an image bearer of Christ. You are a daughter of the King, and this does not have to be your story.
I think that women have a lot of power, and we lose the power when you start revealing parts of yourself that not everyone needs to see or know about.
So one of the things that we really have to grapple with is that we are in a culture that in many ways sanctions things like sexting. There are kind of various articles and publications, well-known teen publications, that actually encourage people for how to look their best for their boyfriend or girlfriend when they send a message. They leave it a little bit ambiguous, but all you have to do is connect the dots as to what they're saying. So just to underscore, it's a very, very high likelihood that you or someone that you know has sent or received a sext. Is that grounds for eternal punishment? No. This is part of what it means to grapple with the ways that our culture has really groomed us and has influenced us to do things to our bodies and to the bodies of other people that do not honor God, don't honor the other, and certainly do not honor ourselves. And so we have to create space to be able to say each of us have received and participated in things that do not honor God. They do not bear glory. And so what ends up happening when we have received a sext, sent a sext, is that we're going to feel a level of judgment and condemnation of how could I have done that? How could I have asked that? And so again, just that question of who are the people in your world, your peers, your mentors, your youth pastors, who are some of the people that you can share some of the stories that you don't want to tell? Because we all have them.
The Apostle Peter says, "Stay alert, watch out for your enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour."
Yeah, and some parts of our culture are going to constantly trying to make you believe that you can do whatever you want as long as it's safe. Culture's gonna tell you things like everyone else is doing it, or just practice safe sex because you won't catch a sexually transmitted disease. Just take a birth control pill and you won't get pregnant. Or you don't want to miss out on life, do you? And just like the enemy's lie in the garden at the beginning of Genesis, there's partial truth to what the culture is saying.
Like using a condom will always protect you from an STD. This is mostly true, but if it's not used correctly or at all, you can still contract an STD.
And a condom most certainly won't protect you from the consequences that are not physical, like the spiritual, social, and even emotional damage that comes from this. A lie that says you can live like the world and not pay the consequences of the sin and shame. That's just a lie.
We must be able to recognize throughout our entire lives, both today and beyond, that the enemy will use the same tactics he always has: partial truth mixed with blatant lies.
That's right.
Trying to get us to ultimately question the goodness and love of God.
And remember, God as our creator is the only one that really knows what's best for us. He made you to experience real human connection, not some robotic or degrading act. You were created to be monogamous, first to God and then to a spouse if that's part of your story. And you were made to honor those around you and guard your heart from sexual impulsive decisions.
This has probably been a whirlwind of information, maybe even a bit unsettling, and you probably have more questions. So for this week's discussion, we want you to ask this question: what do you see happening in the culture today surrounding sex and sexuality, and what surprises you the most?